Hi folks, hope you all had a wonderful weekend. So let's get started. Let me quickly share my screen. I just want quick. Yes, so just a quick confirmation that you all can see my screen and you can hear me pretty well, right? So now, after these 2 days of revision, what do we have here is that it looks like it is rows. Suggestion. We actually talked about like what are the principles of testing that day, right? No, wait on that we just start. It is all about sharing. Okay. So we talked about these specific principles in software testing. And when you talk about these principles up in here, what it says here is that we had these 7 principles being discussed. Now, once we have these principles in place, what more we have here is like what actually is the quality. Quality, when you talk about, we have two different features. Quality as in like quality in general, and your quality as a software quality. In general, if we talk about quality, it is all saying that if any component or system or process is meeting the specified requirements and customer needs and expectations. So here also it is talking about everything based on to what customer wants. Okay. And where do you would you put all that? If you look at the software quality definition, totality of functionality and features of a software product bearing on its ability to satisfy stated or implied needs. by client. And by client, where all these needs are stated and implied in your requirement documentation. So it is all going to be based on to. So you make your application based on to the requirements, and it will be all over that part of the quality. Now the question is, how much testing is enough? Because testing is all about how you can get the details of the errors into that. Okay. So if we talk about the question as in like how much we should test, right? So in this, what do we have here? Is we have these different levels of risk, like depending upon technical, business problem, project risk. We have project constraints like time and budget. And there are a lot of other factors as well, complexity, criticality, usability, and reliability of the application, which actually would affect it, like how much of testing we should be doing for that particular application. Okay. But then, because the testing is also uh, could be a costly affair as well. So that also you have to keep into consideration because for testing also they have a separate budget allocation. So we need to check, right, that how much testing you are going with. So for that, they came up with this economies of testing, wherein what they do is they'll tell you that this is the extent of testing, which is like time. Okay. And here it is number of defects. So basically, when you will start the testing, all defects will be there in your application. You've not identified those defects. But here we are assuming from the perspective that how many of defects will be there. So let's say if that application is gonna have total like let's say 1,000 defects, and those 1,000 will be there. Not identified, but those are there. Now gradually as the time passes in this testing, what will happen in the process of testing? You'll keep identifying those bugs, those errors in your application, and you'll report those errors and those will be removed. Because that is what like overall testing is all about. You find out the errors, bugs, defects, then you report those to the development team. Development team will fix that. That is how it would be. So it will be fixed. The number of defects will be lesser, lesser, lesser with time. There will be a time when there will be almost no defects. But with this time, your cost will also increase. So how to have a control on that? So they say that where both of these are interesting. This is basically your ideal test duration, which we should stop here for testing. Okay. Because if you stop, ideally, if you stop testing before this, your product will be known as under tested application. You go beyond this, over tested application. That is how it would. Now, when you say that it is going to be this, but like practically, this is like ideal situation. But practically, what happens now? Practically go with is somewhere here. right? So practically, this is how it should be. So in this case, uh, you'll have like lesser defects, and after that, what you can do is after that also to save some cost, you can have like one or two QAs doing the testing so that they can find out those specific defects as well. That is how all goes with this subtool here. Yeah, that is what we just discussed. Now the question is when you should stop testing. When there is a coverage of code, functionality requirement reaching a specified point, bug rate falling a certain level, beta alpha testing period. So where all of this will be specified? This looks like it is specified somewhere. You have to match that, okay, if you are fulfilling this, then we should stop testing. So all of these actually define in your test plan. Test plan, I told you earlier that it will be created by your manager. So, yeah, that is where it will be all defined, right? Now, other than that, also we have some factors like your release date approaching, testing deadlines. These are primarily mentioned in your project plan, and some of those can be there in the test plan. Test cases completed with certain percentage passed. So this certain percentage will be specified. It's just some cases as per the management call. So management says that no, go with the high priority test cases first and then close it off. Or you don't have money to run the show. Then also it would be all going. Now quickly we'll talk about because see, this is your analyst training, and in this we'll be learning both, not only manual but automation as well. So knowing about just a bit of difference between these two, not a bad idea. So what happens with this automation testing now? See, in the automation testing, they say it's more reliable because you can perform the same operation without any errors. That is correct, right? I won't say more or less reliable. I would say comparatively less reliable. Manual testing is reliable. It's been there for years now, decades, right? So it is reliable. But when you compare that to the automation, yes, in that case, we can see automation, you just write a script, you get that straight to run to your program, it will run that. But yes, human manual testing because it has humans involvement. That is the reason for this going fail, otherwise nothing else. Initial investment in automation testing is higher, yes, of course, because you need to acquire some tools, and for that you have to pay money. But ROI is very high in automation. ROI is return on investment. That is hard. But for that you have to wait a long run. Manual testing, initial investment would be automation. And that investment is required for the HR. That's it. Human resource. So you need to get people. Once you have those people, then no problem. But here the ROI is lower. Only when you compare that to the auto. Otherwise, it's good. Automation is a good option when you want to go with regression. Now, see, you will hear some names of the different testing types. But don't worry about that. We have another module where we'll discuss what are these specific like regression, performance, all those we'll talk about that. Right now, when you talk about regression, so just a heads up. In regression, you have to execute the same set of test cases again, and again. So because you have to execute the same set of test cases again, and again. So that's why we have automation is a better option for regression test. Here you're using some software tool, so it's faster, right? And here it will be done by humans. But it's not that everything you'll be doing with automation and automation would be better every time. It's not like that. So we'll talk about what happens in this testing, but for now, exploratory testing is something that you can't do with automation. For that, you need humans. It's just like, testing the application while exploring. That your automation can't do. Performance testing is a must to be done in automation. For this, we don't use manual. Like, let's say, now, what do you mean by these performance testing? Like load, stress. It is all about, see, let's say, I'll give you an hypothetical example quickly. We'll understand that later in detail. For now, just a heads up, like, let's say if you have to test, like, how your application would behave or will your application be able to handle if I make 100 of the users joining in at the same time and using the same functionality, like let's say login. So 100 users same time, sending a login request, right? Or 500 users or 10,000 users. So this is all about load and stress, performance testing. You want to check the performance, and physically it is not possible. That's why we go with automation. Here it is, you can't do that. Practically not possible. How will you make 100 people sit in a room? You can do that, but it's like very time because you have to set up that kind of complete kind of lab setup up in there. Then only you can proceed. Also for this, you can't execute those in parallel. With automation, you can do that. With manual, you can't do that. And for automation, you must need to know programming language. Now we have a few programming language options up in there. You can go that with Java, JavaScript. Python is also nowadays used a lot in these testing, right? But yeah, like we'll go with Java because if you can do that in Java, you can do that in any other language. So we're gonna learn Java up in here. For manual testing, programming, knowledge of programming is not required, which is fine. So that is how it would be for automation and manual testing. And this is where we can conclude this module. Now we'll start with our next module quickly. Before that, let me share these modules with you again. Only this module number 3. And the next that we are about to discuss. Oh, with these, I Here it is. I've shared that in the chat. The next module that I'm going to start and the one that we just completed. I'll reshare my screen. Now see, just a quick recap. We started with the STLC. There we talked about waterfall, HI. Okay. This was software development lifecycle. And for Agile, we practiced Jira also. Then our second module, primary move to the business analyst aspect of this whole process. So we did that. Okay. And here we got to learn Microsoft Azure and some other certifications as well. Then my third module, we talked about an introduction. Right? So now is the right time to understand what is STLC. Now, STLC is basically software testing lifecycle because inside that STLC, testing is not just going to be an isolated activity. No. Testing itself has its own phases. And those phases we're going to define here. We'll talk about each of these and we'll have a brief discussion on to how you can differentiate these QA, QC, and tester. So first we'll start with STLC. Now see, earlier we talked about SDLC, that is software development life cycle. Now I say that, okay, what is this new thing here? You are saying that you have something known as STLC here? Yes. Because testing is not an isolated activity. It's not something that you do like in one go. No. Testing also you have to complete in phases. So it is all those sequence of specific activities, which are basically the phases in STLC. So those series of activities now we'll discuss individually. These are the six stages that you have. You have requirement analysis. Yes, you have one more requirement analysis in testing. Then planning, test case development, environment setup, execution, and finally the test cycle closure. We'll talk about each of these. But before we jump onto that, we have this something known as entry and exit criteria. So entry criteria is primarily when you are taking entry into a place. Now, when you talk about these entry and exit criteria, what happens now? Entry criteria is before you are taking entry. Because see, these will be different phases now. So from one phase, you'll be moving to another phase. Now, before you enter onto that phase, here is some entry criteria that you need to complete. And before you're taking exit from that, you have to complete the exit criteria here. Then only you can take exit. When you're saying entry and exit criteria, you can take entry or you can get exit only when you're done with these criteria. There's something known as suspension criteria as well, but that actually depends project to project. And that is all about like when that particular criteria matches, then you have to halt your that particular phase. Now, these are the five phases that I was talking about. Fine. We have these six phases here in STLC. In this also you'll have the C. Requirement analysis, test planning, test case development. So now. Now again, I'm telling you that your test engineer, your QA is not gonna sit idle. Because if we, this is STLC. If we compare this, to your STLC, then in STLC we generally go with this. STLC is a compact version where you'll have these phases. Basically, with this, what we're doing up in here is now see if you look at this STLC, what would happen? You will have your application. Okay, one thing is missing here. Testing. So here, when we talk about this testing, so in this, as you can see, this is where the testing is. Now, the general idea of testing, we said that, okay, if it is testing, then what would we do? We will be getting what? We have to test the application. And there's a reason why it is after development, because in the development, the application will be ready and it will be handed over to the testing. That is how it will go. But what happens actually is that in this case, now when you have this testing phase here, it is not that testing will be simply start here only once you have the application. No. Nowadays, testing will be incorporated right after this till all of these phases. They'll perform testing, they'll prepare for testing. See, testing, they cannot test the application because the application is not ready yet. But at least they can do some other activities which are related to testing. And here, we are going to discuss those only. So first thing first, requirement analysis. Now, so that okay, requirement analysis is something that we had earlier as well. Yes, we had this in your STLC as well. But there it was all taken care by BAs and they did the requirement analysis. Now, what you have to do as a QA is you have to first collect this. That is how it is. So, as and when that requirement analysis ends, see, this is where you have that requirement analysis over, and here we get that requirement documentation. Now, this requirement documentation share with all the teams. So, as you can see, the requirement analysis, after your requirement analysis in STLC, we have the requirements up in here. So now what this STLC will do is, as and when you get these requirements, analyzing the requirements from the testing perspective will now start. And then it will keep moving on to the other phases. So this requirement analysis that you're talking about here, this is actually your requirement analysis from the testing perspective for the requirements which are received from the BAs. So you'll again analyze those requirements based on to your requirement details. So it is all about verifying whether the requirement is done properly or not. And if there are any problems with the requirements, then those will be reported to the testing. And that's why to start with, we will need what? So here, the requirement analysis is all about analyzing the requirements from testing perspective. Yeah. And if there are any issues, then you can report that. Now they are giving all these options, but primarily you will connect with BAs because they are the one responsible for all of your these, right? So we're going to do that up in here. We talk about the entry criteria here. So you need requirement documentation and you'll perform an requirements analysis and you will come up with the list of all testable requirements based on that. So activities, if we talk about, we'll talk about the identifying the test, RTM and all that. But see, nothing. I don't know why they have included this here. But this needs to be removed because here you will simply check. This is actually for the advanced users. Primarily, you will simply check this. You will simply collect the details and verify the requirements. Now, once you're done verifying the requirements, and if there were any problems with the requirements, you have reported that to the respective who have created this. So now after the phase one, when you have clarity over the requirements from the testing perspective, you can start with your test plan. Right? Now test plan, because it is a plan, it is a managerial activity. Where you'll talk about what. Right? So that is what your plan. Okay. And who will be testing what? So so all the roles and responsibilities of the test engineers, okay? That is all will be done here in this test plan. And this test plan is gonna work as a rule book, guidebook for all the test engineers in the team. It also has an inclusion of, you can see here, they have mentioned for cost estimation, all that will be there, resource planning, determining roles and responsibilities, tools, training requirement, like everything will have that up in here in this test plan. At the end of this, you should be getting the test plan document. And this will be done by your test lead or your test manager. So if you're talking about the entry criteria, it is the requirement documents. And exit criteria, it would be test strategy, test plan, and test effort estimation. Because that is what you would get at the end of this. Now, the activities, if you talk about in this, a planning document will be created. Will have all the strategy and what you will be saying. So everything like tool selection, effort estimation, resource planning, roles and responsibilities, training, everything will be mentioned here in your this test plan. They also have a mention of so we ended with a few topics from the previous module, differentiation and testing. Now see why we are doing this. Actually, when this all is happening, We are saying that we're going to do this requirement analysis. But when you do this, because this is where you have the requirements, actually, we go with this because final testing will start here when you will have the product. But before you have the product, you have to prepare yourself for testing activities, and that you would start immediately after this. So while the design team is designing the application and development team is developing the application, testing team is not going to sit idle. They will keep doing these SDLC phases initial activities like the requirement analysis, test planning. It will be all done here in parallel to the design phase. Then there are a few more activities before you actually start testing that application. And all those we'll discuss here in this STLs. Right now, we talked about these two phases. One is all about analyzing the requirements from testing perspective. And another one is an authoritative activity where your manager, once you have discussed and identified all the requirements, then they'll go with our discussion. That is how these STLC phases will be. Anyways, we'll go with the next one, test case development, but we'll do that tomorrow because it's going to take some time. And with this, actually, I will expose you to some other documentation as well. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. That what actually the test case development is, how you can use that for your specific benefit here. Everything we'll kind of discuss tomorrow.
And Rajat, so can you map show with your HR or regarding the reporting? Because yesterday I checked the reporting, it was haven't uploaded when I talked with Janki today, and after that she upload all last week reporting.
Just give me.
If I didn't inform her, then there was no reporting at that time.
So now we have recordings till 13. So all the recordings are there now, right?
Yeah. But for that, I have to inform someone that you
I
have to
already
upload
had
the
a
report.
word with these guys. So they did not have that done till Thursday or Friday.
On Thursday, we haven't did anything. That's why they haven't uploaded.
Hmm. Okay. Well, now it is there, right?
Yeah. But they will take lots of time without informing them. They haven't uploaded.
Now it will not happen. Now I'll make them do this as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
I had one more question.
Yes, please.
So when I had spoken to Janki, she had mentioned that the course was about 6 to 8 weeks, but I just wanted to know what the exact duration of it would be because I'm getting my EAD in like 2 weeks, so I was hoping to start my marketing then.
Yeah, sure. See, your marketing can go in parallel with this course.
Okay.
So for that, it is all fine. See, so as and when you get your EAD, okay, you can
Okay.
inform the marketers that they can start your marketing in parallel to that as well. So for that, they need not to wait till you complete this.
Okay, and then I guess we can estimate that we'll finish the training by end of July, I guess.
Yeah, end of July, it will be all over for sure. In fact, we'll try to
Okay.
wrap it up around mid-July in there as well.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll start getting in touch with my marketer in the meantime.
Yeah, sure, of course.
All right, thank you.
So I already shared both of these in the chat and meet tomorrow now. Right? Bye, folks. Take care.